My peach dump cake with cake mix recipe is easy and delicious. Made with canned peaches and butter, you really only need 3 ingredients, but if you want to take this dessert to the next level, you can add a few other things to really make it outstanding. Let's go over the ingredients. You will need 3 15.25 ounce cans of peaches and heavy syrup. My cans are not drained. 1 15.25 ounce box of cake mix. I am using white. And 2 sticks of butter. I am using unsalted, but you can use salted. Although you really only need those 3 ingredients, like I said, if you want to make it even better, you can also add 1/4 cup of light brown sugar, as I measure 60 grams, half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, and 1/8 teaspoon of cloves, 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, and a sprinkling of salt. I have my 9x13 baking dish. I use some of the butter from one of the sticks to grease it, so I'm all ready to get started. But before I do, I'm going to take my butter and I'm going to put it back into the refrigerator. You will see why later on in the recipe. The first step in my peach dump cake recipe is emptying the canned peaches into the dish. So, like I said, my dish is already buttered, so I'm literally just going to pour my canned peaches in here. As I said earlier, my cans are not drained. I don't feel like my cans had too much juice in them. If you feel like your canned peaches were more juice than mine are, then you can definitely drain them a little bit. I would keep at least the juice of 1 can, because other than that, I think it would be a little dry. But if you want to drain 1 of them, maybe 2, you could definitely do that. And now I'm just spreading them out a little bit so that they aren't all clumped in one place. Like I said, these extra ingredients are optional, but I highly recommend them to add more flavor. Like I said, 1/4 cup of light brown sugar. A lot of traditional Southern style peach cobbler recipes call for a little bit of brown sugar. Even though I'm using canned peaches and heavy syrup, I still think a little bit of brown sugar is going to help with the flavor. Just a little bit, not too much. Sprinkling it in. It doesn't have to be perfect. I am going to mix it in a little bit more. Now for the spices, like I said, half a teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/4 of nutmeg, and 1/8 of cloves. Just going to sprinkle that in. Some people like peach cobbler to be extremely well spiced. I like a little bit of spice, but not too much, and I think this is a good middle ground. If you're using fresh peaches to make a pie or a cobbler, I don't think you need as much in the way of spices, but since I'm using canned, I think canned peaches need more help, so I definitely think it's a good idea to add some spices. Teaspoon of lemon juice, or excuse me, a tablespoon of lemon juice. So I use this to help sprinkle it. This is kind of controversial, but I think a little bit of lemon juice, as in other fruit dessert recipes, is going to help bring out the flavor. So I would recommend adding it, but once again, not absolutely necessary. And now just a sprinkling of salt. Salt will help balance out the flavors. Most desserts call for a little bit of salt, so if you don't use salted butter, I would sprinkle in a little bit to the filling. Now I'm just going to help the sugar and spices combine with the peaches. You don't have to stir it in too much. This is a dump cake, it's supposed to be easy. Just make sure everything is combined and that your peach slices are spread out as evenly as possible. There, I think everything's pretty evened out. Don't obsess over making everything perfect. A dump cake is supposed to be a quick and easy recipe. Now it's time for the cake mix. As you can see, the peaches are as flat as I can get them, so I'm just going to take my box of cake mix and just sprinkle it over the top like this. Trying to do so as evenly as possible, but not obsessing over being perfect, because it does not have to be perfect. Now that my cake mix is on the top, I'm going to take a fork and I'm just going to spread it out as evenly as possible. I'm literally just taking my fork and dragging it across the top, evening out the cake mix, distributing it as evenly as possible, and breaking up some lumps along the way. Notice that I am not mixing. You do not want to mix a dump cake. You literally just want to put the layers on top of each other. The peaches underneath are not a solid layer, so it will move a little bit as you're trying to do this. That's okay. Like I said, a dump cake is meant to be a simple, forgiving recipe, so just do the best that you can. It does not have to be absolutely perfect. Now that the cake mix is done and I'm preheating my oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, it's time to work on the butter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to slice the butter into small pads and lay them across the top. So here I have my butter. I'm going to take off this end. And let's get this out of the way. And all I'm literally going to do is take a sharp knife and slice down to make small bits of butter, and then just place them on top of the dump cake like that. So that one was kind of small. I think you want them to be more like that. You can see, make pads of butter and lay them across the top. This is why I recommended keeping your butter in the refrigerator, because this is extremely difficult to do with room temperature butter. You need a sharp knife and cold butter, because if your knife is dull and your butter is warm, it is going to be extremely difficult to cut it into thin slices like I'm doing now. If you've seen other dump cake recipes on the internet in which people melt the butter in the microwave and then pour it on top, I've never done that. I think you could, but I think you run the risk of accidentally pouring too much butter here and not enough there. And that is not what you want, because the point of the butter is that as your dump cake bakes in the oven, the butter is going to sink down and out, and it is going to moisten the cake mix and turn it into a crispy, crunchy crumble topping. So it's very important that the butter gets evenly distributed. That's why if you pour it all into one place, some of your cake mix is going to be dry and it is not going to turn into a crumble. Someone suggested maybe freezing the butter and then putting it into a food processor or grating it on a cheese grater, then sprinkling it over the top. I think you could do that as well. So if anyone makes this recipe and decides to grate the butter and then sprinkle it over the top, let me know. I've also had someone suggest maybe mixing the butter and the cake mix off to the side by hand or with a spoon and making kind of a crumble and sprinkling that over the top. I think you could do that as well. So I've always just stayed with the way I've always done it because I'm afraid it's not going to turn out. But if you feel adventurous and you want to try a different way, like I said, please let me know how it goes. If you see a spot where you missed, just put a little pat of butter there. I am going to continue doing this. Probably going to use 1.5, if not 2 sticks. And then it will be time to put this into the oven. Just finishing up putting butter across the top of the dump cake. As you can see, I've used almost all of the 2 sticks. I'm just cutting off little pieces here and there to fill in gaps where I put the pieces of butter a little too far apart. Now it's ready for the oven. I'm going to put my peach dump cake with cake mix into a 350-degree oven uncovered. I will let you know for how long. I just pulled my peach dump cake with cake mix out of the oven. It was in at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, uncovered, for 1 hour, 60 minutes. It looks and smells incredible. As you can see, this dump cake had a perfectly golden brown topping. Combined with the smell of spiced peaches, I couldn't wait to dig in and give it a try. And when I took the first bite, I knew that my old-fashioned peach dump cake with cake mix and canned peaches recipe was a big success because it was absolutely delicious. First off, the flavor. I think the best way to describe the flavor would be a combination of a southern-style peach cobbler made with canned peaches and a crisp or a crumble. This dessert definitely had a lot of peach flavor, but it was subdued and in the background in the way that a lot of southern peach cobblers are, especially if they're made with canned peaches, because it doesn't matter if we're talking about peaches or some other type of fruit, canned fruit just doesn't have the same amount of flavor as fresh or frozen does, so it needs help. That's where the spices come in, and honestly, I think that I used the perfect amount of cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves to accentuate the peach flavor without overwhelming it, and with that little bit of lemon juice as well to help bring out the fruitiness. It was absolutely perfect. In fact, I liked the spiced peach flavor from this dump cake so much that it inspired me to make another recipe. That video will be coming out sometime soon, and like I said, it was amazing. I thought that the level of sweetness was just right as well. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I used peaches canned in heavy syrup, and with the addition of the little bit of light brown sugar, I thought that was absolutely perfect. You could leave out the brown sugar if you want, but if you use peaches canned in juice, I would definitely add some white sugar, probably 1/4 cup, maybe even up to 1/2 cup. I'd have to think about it to give you a firm number. And the topping was delicious as well. It had the butteriness that you know and love from other dump cakes. So, like I said, it definitely reminded me of a crumble. And what I really liked about this recipe and that I wasn't expecting is that all of that syrup with the peaches carried a lot of the spices, and as the dump cake cooked, that soaked into the dump cake. So the crumble topping was actually a lot more flavorful than in other dump cake recipes. Instead of just tasting like butter, it tasted like butter mixed with spices with a hint of peaches. It was extremely delicious. Even though this was my first time making peach dump cake with cake mix and canned peaches, I thought it turned out perfectly. I actually made this dessert for a group, and every single person who tried it thought that it was outstanding. There really isn't anything that I would change, but there are a couple things that I wanted to point out. As I said at the beginning of the video, I used a white cake mix. I honestly think that this recipe would probably be best with a neutral flavored mix like white or yellow, but I could also see it being really good with a spice cake mix. So if you make this recipe and you use a spice cake mix, let me know how it turns out. I also wanted to point out that even though I think this is a type of cobbler, it didn't have as much juice in the middle as a lot of cobblers do. I think that a lot of the peach syrup was absorbed by the cake mix. So if you're looking for a peach cobbler that has a lot of syrup, this isn't the recipe for you. But if you're looking for something that's really quick and easy and comes together in just a few minutes, then this is the recipe that you want. Another thing I wanted to mention was that although I thought the cake mix topping was crunchy enough for me, some people might want it a little bit crunchier. If you do, then I would probably drain one of the cans so that there isn't as much liquid. You don't want to drain all of the cans more than likely because then your cake might be kind of dry. But like I said, if you want it to be extra crispy, add less liquid. One final thing I did want to bring up is that I don't normally use a lot of cloves in my cooking, but I thought that they worked really well in this. And one thing I did want to say is that even though I did use ground cloves, I actually bought whole cloves and then just pinched the clove berries between my fingers to grind them right before using them. So that might have made a difference in the recipe as to why I liked it so much. So you might want to give that a try. Like I already said, my peach dump cake with cake mix and canned peaches recipe was a hit. It was easy to make, it tasted great. I love the combination of spices with the peaches and the hint of brown sugar. I wouldn't change anything. Whether you eat it plain, with Cool Whip, whipped cream, or ice cream, I know you will love this. It would be perfect as a summer dessert, after a barbecue or picnic, or for the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, or any day. So I hope you give this a try. If you make it, I know you'll love it. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time.